Hi, everybody. Thanks for making it this far in the day, and I hope everybody's feeling good. Feel free to stand up and walk around. Wanted to introduce Dr. Lisa Galloway. Lisa holds a doctorate in curriculum and instruction, and she has an extensive experience teaching and mentoring high school students. She's worked for 20 years as a high school teacher in Canada, California, and Hawaii, and for 6 years has been at the Center on Disability Studies at UH Manoa, focused on developing curriculum, supporting Native Hawaiian students with and without disabilities, entering STEM fields. She lives on Lanai and is currently working on projects Hokulani and CLD teams to support Pacific Island students.
Thank you, Patrick. And now I feel kind of bad because I don't have the bio that all of you probably read when you decided to come to this symposium. So, Patrick, do you mind telling us more about yourself? You got from the slides here that, you know, I'm a writer and an educator. I'm not an employer, and I'm so happy that I'm not here alone because this is the guy who's actually an employer and knows a heck of a lot about it, and he's great at some talk story. Do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Thank you. And I am not the writer, curriculum developer, or trainer, so I am a little bit out of my element up here. But I'm Patrick Gartside. I'm the founding executive director of Work Now Hawaii. We're a vocational training organization for people with disabilities, including those with significant disabilities. And we've been providing employment services and job opportunities for the past 5 or 6 years now. Yep, that's what we do.
And he's good at it. So we have some slides here, and some of it we're going to skip over because you've heard it from other presenters today. But for sure, slow us down if you want us to elaborate on anything. And if you're starting to nod off, we'll realize that it's time to move on. This is what we had planned for our agenda today. We really want to give you information plus activities. We really want to be interactive, which is why we're not up on the podium. We took one look at that and then, oh no, that's not going to work. So you can see in blue, that's the activities we're hoping you want to engage in, but it's getting later in the day, and if you're not into that, just let us know and we'll change things up a little bit. So today, we'd like to interact with you. We did pass out some papers. I don't think they got to every table, but if you'd like to jot notes and ask questions at the end, we're happy to take questions at the end. Or if you're like Lisa or I, just shout them out. We're happy to take them impromptu as well. But we did drop some papers, so please use the sheet to write down your question, then we'll come back at the end. You'll see there's example questions that we kind of thought up when we were planning this, and if you like those questions, just ask those out loud. I think you all probably know what inclusion means, but here's the definition by the CDC, which basically means including people with disabilities in everything, and doing that by identifying all of the barriers, whether they're attitudinal barriers or physical barriers or communication barriers. And then it also means getting fair treatment, so not being discriminated against. And I like this image because one of the things I learned in doing these studies and looking at ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, is that even if a person doesn't have a disability but is perceived as having one, then they are considered to have a disability. And this woman has a skin condition. That means that some people misjudge her. But other things include, of course, you've heard about universal design. And then we're going to talk a little bit about reasonable accommodations.
So what does accessibility mean? Well, it's the design, construction, development, and maintenance of facilities, information, communication, technology, programs, and services so that all people, including the people with disabilities, can fully and independently use them. Pretty simple. I know Kiriko gave us a great presentation on that. We've got a few other terms that we'd like to define here. We've got job shadowing, so the observation of a person in their current role by someone who's interested in a similar career. We've got job preparation. This is pre-employment services. Sometimes you building networks, advice for job seekers, resume writing, filling out applications, interview preps, and internships. I don't know if we've all had internships here, but serving an internship is the position of a student or a trainee who wants to work in an organization or in an industry. And sometimes they do it without pay, but in order to gain experience or to satisfy requirements or qualifications.
That's the kind of thing that if you want to hear a talk story example, you can ask for one anytime, because this guy knows a lot about that. But also I put this slide up because that's what our work is focused on in the projects that we're doing. And the projects are Hokulani and CLD teams. So some of you are in those projects, so you know what we're doing there. And all of these projects have interns, and our interns are offered paid work experiences at 3 sites near where they live. And we also have been developing employer training materials so that the employers know what to do to be more inclusive with the students they have who have disabilities, in particular neurodivergence.
We have our first exercise here, group brainstorming. What are employers most concerned about? So what are top concerns of employers when they're looking to hire persons with disability? What would you worry about if you were hiring somebody to work for you that has a disability? So imagine you're about to welcome a new high school intern at your workplace who is neurodivergent. What are the top 3 concerns you are likely to have? Why don't we take a couple minutes to discuss that at our tables?
See if you can guess what the research says. Don't have to write it down, but if you want to, you may. Otherwise, just talk amongst yourselves. Or you can shout it out.
The warrants at the leading that it has the strand. And it is a dime, so it's a minute. And
And they do the job is definitely one of them. You'll see that in a slide coming up. That's one. Ding, ding, ding. Let's have 3 more. I saw some nods over there.
yeah, for the heat. Yeah. I'll take the guy in it.
Okay, are you ready for the research? This will blow you away. I loved this study when I found it. I found it very educational. So they have this great graphic to say what they discovered, but in 2019, the National Institute on Health had a look at what employers were really worried about, and they broke it into these 4 categories. And if you want to read that 44-page study, it's actually worth it because there are so many resources that you can access in that study to solve the problems, whether you're the employee and you want to advocate for yourself at the workplace, or you're a student, or you have students that are going into internships, things like that. So number 1 definitely is the cost. And come to find out, it's actually not that expensive to do accommodations. Some of them are free. On average, they might cost $500. And they can be no-tech, low-tech, and high-tech.
Touch briefly on that. As an employer of primarily people with disabilities, the cost of reasonable accommodations over the 5 years has been negligible. Oftentimes free. We talk about high tech, low tech. Oftentimes, once again, they can be free or very low cost. Sometimes people with disabilities, they can bring their own accommodations, whether it be headphones or accommodations can also be provided by state agencies such as assistive technology, screen readers, and stuff like that. So there's pathways for that.
So we have a few videos here, but we're not going to show all of them. I think the first one is pretty obvious. One size fits all. It's a lot like what Kariko was talking about. And it's if you just need to tell somebody why you need to make accommodations that are individualized, then it's a good video to show them. But the second one I thought had some good visuals, and we may need to pause for a second while we get technology help to run this video. Let's find out. So did we skip a slide? Let me make sure. Yeah. So another one. Did any of you? I think you did. You talked about job performance. That's a huge concern for employers, and the idea that somehow their not going to be as productive, they're going to be late, they're going to be absent. This is kind of old thinking, and this is a common theme with this research. It's rarely the case, and the important part is to get the accommodation and the job fit right for the individual employee. There are lots of specialized employment resources centers. I think Patrick has got one of them. And then the National Organization on Disability offers this free assessment to see how inclusive a climate does your organization have. And so I really recommend you look at that one too.
So we talked about job performance being a concern of potential employers for people with disabilities. And I think, we run into a situation where sometimes we make bad job matches. Has anybody ever had a job that they didn't like? How productive were you in the job that you didn't like? Sometimes people just make assumptions. Okay, well, you have a disability. Most people with your disability work in this field. That doesn't work. Of course, job performance is going to suffer when we have a bad job match.
They're also worried about legal consequences. Did anybody come up with that one? This is another one that the research does not bear this out. In fact, for the most part in this country, the ADA will favor the employers when there's a decision to be made about whether or not they were treated unfairly, the employees, that is. And again, the solution to that is getting a better job fit, but there's also some strategies that are laid out. There's a lot of material online, and some of it is government. We've heard this already today. You need to have clear expectations for employees. The employers and their staff need accommodations training, and that's what we're developing here, amongst many others. Everybody is recommended to document what's going on and to give a lot of regular and immediate feedback. This is the Australian Network on Disabilities also has good information.
So I've experienced, as a service provider, we serve people with disabilities, we serve businesses in the community, and sometimes employers are afraid to take disciplinary actions, not maybe fear of the ADA, but they're just afraid, I'm working with a person with a disability and, I don't want to hurt their feelings, or so then there's this, perceived reputation disorder, and then they're afraid, employers are afraid to reprimand people when they need to be corrected. And I think it goes back to what has been said in almost all of the presentations today. Good strategies would be involve clear expectations and clear communication. The definition of an employer-employee relationship, there needs to be clear communications both ways. As an employer, I need to set expectations. As an employee, you need to speak up for what you need.
From this study, there were these main takeaways. Workers with disabilities are a huge underutilized labor pool. Most people with disabilities are underemployed or unemployed, and they don't want to be. It's not good for their health. Or society in general. Most employers hold stereotypical views still that are not at all supported by the research, which means, of course, that the employers are not getting the research. They're not learning what we're learning. So they lack information, and there's loads and loads of evidence-based answers to their concerns. I'm going to kind of skip over this next slide because these are other things that study came up with, but if you see a word in bold you want us to pause and talk about, just say so. Otherwise, you have access to this slideshow. And then here's another video we want you to watch. This is the Employer's Guide to Reasonable Accommodation. And all of these are things that anyone can share with anyone else if they want to advocate for this. So, the question now, because we're going to move into another little group activity, if your game, is do you already feel ready to navigate an inclusive, accessible workplace? Do you think you, well, you imagine yourself as an employer, as an employee, as somebody who's trying to open that door for a young person? You know, why and why not are you ready, and how are you going to get ready? Just a show of hands. Do you feel ready? Okay, maybe. All right, okay. So this is what we have in mind. There we go. So we thought it would be fun at this point in the day, if you're feeling a little punchy, to work with one or two partners on a scenario where you are a worker with a disability who must make decisions about disclosing their disability. Remember, you don't ever have to disclose. It's, am I going to or not? And we think this will be fun because you get to talk to each other, you get to think a little bit, and you get to help one another. And if you actually role play, I must confess I taught drama for 2 years, about 1,000,000 years ago, so I can help you if you need that. But if you actually role play, I think you'll really see what this kind of feels like in action. And when you're doing that, just ad-lib it and see what happens when you're talking about the who, what, when, where, how, and why. For an example, we could take volunteers right now and have this discussion on this scenario. This scenario is you are returning to work after recently suffering a traumatic brain injury due to an accident. Does anybody want to be the participant? That one's easy because the line is right there. No actors. They're all looking down. They have very important phone calls right now. Okay, we'll do. Well, the next one is, the next slide is 4 different scenarios to try out. So we just want to show you how this works. Do you need a demonstration or not? It could be embarrassing for us, so that's a good answer. Thank you. Okay, so at your tables, or if you're all alone at your table, find somebody to work with. And please choose one or more of these scenarios and choose one or more of those roles where you are the person with a disability making that decision. Maybe you're the boss or the HR person. Maybe you're just a friend, a colleague at the workplace, and you're helping, or a friend outside of the workplace, and you're helping this person make that decision. So there's your 4 scenarios. We're going to give you a lot of time to do this. Ready? Go. So remember, you do have a piece of paper on your table if you want to write down questions that you think would be valuable for everybody to hear the answers to, and I'll collect those in a moment. Otherwise, of course, you can call out. But you can see Patrick is drawing people to his honey. So you stick around if you prefer a much more one-on-one exchange. With this activity, I'm sure you discussed disclosure. I definitely saw some people on task. Thank you for that. And did you learn anything? Did you want to share anything? Did you have any questions? As in fact, all of those scenarios, it really depends on the individual, and there's a lot of variability in what happens. And I'm sure some of you are thinking about that already. So we'll move along. I hope you had fun. And there's a few more slides we'll go through, but I want to have at least one good example here. So Patrick's going to tell you, I'll call it the Starbucks story, but we won't have that on the slide.
Thank you. So once again, as a service provider, we work directly with people with disabilities. We also work with community employers. Sometimes community employers reach out to us and say, do you have disability etiquette training? Or how do I navigate these reasonable accommodations that someone is asking for? We worked with a large franchise of coffee makers who reached out to us because they had an employee that was asking for reasonable accommodations, and they just didn't even know where to begin, and either did the person with a disability. So we got in there and we just started asking some of the basic questions. What are the core job functions? Have you ever applied for a job? Usually on the back or the bottom of the application, there's a little checkbox that says, I can do this job with or without a reasonable accommodation. So kind of a weird question. But generally, we took the job description and we took the areas where she was thriving. They have a great employee review process, so they were able to kind of score, doing really well in these areas, and some of these areas are where there were challenges. So where there were some areas for challenges, these are the gaps. And what we use is a tool that's called a gap analysis that takes the expectations of the job and it takes the aptitudes of the individual, and we identify what are some of the challenges, and we identify some of the interventions that can be used. And it comes back to a lot of what we heard today. Clear expectations on what the job needs to be done, So what we did is we scheduled weekly meetings with the manager and the shift managers for them all to get together and to talk about some of those expectations. Some of the challenges that she was having was this franchise, this major corporation had rules, and the rules said that you were supposed to do things this way. But then when it boiled down to the store level, it kind of works out a little bit differently. And then that was causing a lot of frustration between her and her coworkers. Now, by having some of these dialogues with the store manager and the shift managers, we were able to identify some of those things and implement some strategies. And some of the strategies were just going back to the core functions that the coffee chain, some of the core processes that the coffee chain was implementing. So they went back and then they started making sure that they were implementing them better. There was more clear communication back and forth between her and her employer. And slowly those meetings started to fade back, and I think they shifted back to monthly meetings. We were able to help navigate those accommodations, and she's been successful in employment ever since. I mean, talk about a simple, reasonable accommodation of just getting down to clear communication and expectations.
And Patrick, didn't you say that same manager at that coffee shop also went on to hire more people with disabilities? Because
not only did they resolve the conflict between the employee and the coworkers, but then they also started to implement diversity training, and they all were taking American Sign Language lessons, and really started to foster a community of belonging.
I just heard that story on Friday. I thought that was awesome. And that's often what happens. Sometimes we have to be the trailblazer to open that door for that employer, and then they get what they're missing. That ignorance it's unveiled. Oh, sorry. So you'll see here there's a couple of strategies, and we'll just briefly go over that too. The interactive process, the mentoring and communication strategies. And this slide will give you more links to that. The case law one is a government one, and it kind of might scare employers sometimes because it's law, but it's very, very clear. And there are so many different ways to do mentoring and so many different materials and strategies for communication. So there's a 21-page booklet from the USD Department of Labor. That link. We've talked already about assistive technology and universal design. These things help everybody with and without disabilities at the workplace. There's simple things like just disability etiquette. It can be, whether you have a disability or not, you notice that there's something maybe lacking in one or more of the staff. They just need a little simple reminder of, what's the right way to approach somebody. And talk to them and talk about them at work. And so that's available at this link. Disability In has a lot of resources as well, and I believe that's connected to, no, not this one. So JAN is another great one, the Job Accommodation Network, and these are really good. We really believe that people should be advocating for this change in employment for people with disabilities. And so when somebody says, why should I do this? Here's some of the reasons why. So indirect benefits, Jan has figured out, there's improved interactions with coworkers. There's increased company morale and overall productivity, increased safety, improved customer interactions, because as you probably know, in our lifetime, 7 out of 10 of us will have a disability, and the other 3 of us will be helping to look after them. So disability is normal. That's the human condition. And that's a message people still need to hear. There's increased overall attendance and profitability and the customer base. And then Hector's going to tell you about the direct.
Just a couple more things on Ask Jan. Ask Jan has been a valuable resource as an employer. Not only, if you go to their website, you can research by a disability and come up with a variety of interventions or a variety of accommodations that might help someone be successful at work. As an employer also, they do have a tool that helps you track requests for accommodation and helps you guide you through that process. So Ask Jan's certainly been a very valuable project as for an employer. So also over time, some current workers become disabled due to aging or accidents. Good accessibility helps retain workers. According to Ask Jan, the direct benefits to employers... does we read this? The direct benefits to employers include keeping valued employees, increasing productivity, eliminating costs of training new employees, increasing attendance, increasing diversity, saving workers' compensation or other insurance costs, hiring a qualified person with a disability, and promoting an employee.
Of course, there are also federal and state incentives depending on where the business is, and you can check those out at Ask Earn. We're not going to share this video with you right now. The DEI video Disability Equality Index is for employers with 500 or more employees, but they also have just volumes of materials that their employers use, and it's global. And it's kind of inspiring to watch their video and see why these employers with some pretty big companies are saying, this is what we do and this is how we do it, and this is why it's valuable to us. So we recommend that as well. And that's it.
Hey.